Since premiering at the Venice Film Festival last year, Alexandra Simpson's movie No Sleep Till has been winning accolades at film festivals from Marrakesh to Lincoln Center. It has its local premiere here at WJCT Studios on September 30th. Alexandra Simpson joins us now via video from her home in Paris. Alexandra, thanks for being here and congratulations on the film's reception.
Hi, Anne. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have you, Alexandra. In its most basic sense, No Sleep Till is a story about fictional residents of Atlantic Beach as they prepare for, or really do nothing to prepare for, an impending hurricane. But this film is really much less about plot than atmospherics. How do you describe the film? How do you talk about it?
Mhm. I think a lot of the atmosphere of the film has to do with my relationship to Atlantic Beach, to Jacksonville. My father's from there, but I've never grown up there. I grew up in France, and we would go there in the summers, always with the idea that the summer would end and we would leave. So I never really felt that I belonged, which sort of created this relationship of nostalgia and fantasy and dream. And I knew I'd want to make my first feature film in Atlantic Beach because it's a place that I'm very close to, yet it's a place that I don't belong to. And I think that those are the sentiments that fueled the tone of the film, which really does take over. And then, of course, there's an anticipation, which is one that is very mundane for local people, on coastal Florida. It's one that's uneventful, and I think that that's the direction I wanted to take, as opposed to going into the tropes of, a disaster movie.
Right. And the film is very impressionistic in the way it's shot. The story is sort of a nonlinear ensemble cast, film with a lot of storylines and not necessarily one central character. And in some ways, not that much happens in terms of, plot, but it is still this really suspenseful and gripping film. And it kind of speaks to what the characters themselves are experiencing, which is this, kind of caught between just a very mundane daily existence and this impending catastrophe.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think I was very interested in what happens in a moment like this, where your life is sort of ruptured. You're forced to pause. So it is eventful in that it's out of the usual, but there is so much stagnation in a moment like this. And I was really dreaming what happens in these moments, because for some it's an occasion to try something, to maybe to try to leave or to try to connect with someone. And for others it's simply just waiting for the night to go by. And I think that finding the excitement was really just watching these people during the night in the most humane ways. And when I say humane, it's that human behaviors can be unexpected at times. So I think there are unexpected behaviors at times, that do create some sort of, I don't know, excitement maybe amongst this very calm, generally calm atmosphere.
Yeah, I saw a one review of the film, and we should say it's been getting just rave reviews all over the place, and in many national and international publications. But one that
Mhm.
compared it to kind of a duck paddle, because there's sort of this furious action happening underneath the surface, but
Mhm.
this sort of placid overlayer. And while this film is about impending risk in the form of a hurricane, there's also these sort of undercurrents that you have in there about environmental um, collapse,
Mhm.
or gentrification and the threat that that holds. Can you talk a little bit about working with those themes into and around this plot point of impending hurricane?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to go back to my very strong desire to make my first film in Atlantic Beach, was really to sort of document these places of my childhood, this sort of like old Florida that's menaced not only by climate change but also, as you said, gentrification. And I think it's important, even though we don't dive into it too much in detail or anything. We really touch upon this subject with the scene of this big house in construction. And I'm seeing these places disappear and being rebuilt in something that is aesthetically sort of homogenous, and also charmless in a way. And it's I was really interested in approaching this vulnerability of the place, whether it's, you know, gentrification or climate change, as well as approaching the vulnerability that it sparks within the characters. So there really is a sense of precarity everywhere and in everyone. And I think that that's what ties this sort of collective ensemble in the film, is this sense of precarity.
One of the film, moments that I found really affecting is this construction scene. There's all of these things that are happening as people are, anticipating this storm, and one of them is a guy is kind of checking out a home under construction, and it really does sort of drive home this idea of, building in a place as fragile
Mhm.
and as imperiled as coastal Florida. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this translates in the presence of these two pool cleaners. They have almost like an absurdist presence. You don't really know what they're doing, who they are. They talk in French and English. It's kind of odd, but I think that it does reflect this sort of confusion in sort of polishing the coastal places, with this knowledge of such fragility and what that creates, and again in people, because it is in everybody's mind that this is a fragile place. Yes, yet it is a place that's continuously being polished.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to Alexandra Simpson. She is the writer and director of No Sleep Till. It's a film shot and set here in Atlantic Beach. The film screens at WJCT Studios in late September on the 30th. And if you have questions for Alexandra or comments about the production, you can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to talk a little bit about your experience in Atlantic Beach because you sort of mentioned it. I mean, you grew up in France, you summered very frequently in Atlantic Beach, visiting maybe once or twice a year. Has this place always appealed to you as a storyteller? And have you always viewed the place through this cinematic lens? I mean, one of
Mhm.
the grand things about this film is just this exceptional cinematography and editing that really is transporting. It's just very beautiful.
Mhm. I really think that what drives me to create something in this place is such strong nostalgia. It really starts with a feeling, and then more so than image, I think I'm so inspired by the sounds that I hear them, because nostalgia is very much linked to sound, at least for me. And there's very specific sounds like a distant thunder, the cicadas, the frogs. All of these really sort of punctuate the film in a way that where the sound becomes as important as the image. They really go hand in hand. And in terms of image, I mean, to me, it's such a different aesthetic than France, and there's so much charm, whether it's in the wilderness and the skies or the neon signs. And I think that my DOP, not being from Florida or from America and coming with such alien eyes, really made us lean into our sort of fascination for places that we're not used to live with. But we there is definitely a fascination of someone who doesn't belong there.
Yeah, the soundscape is a whole other, element of experiencing this film. And as you say, there's all of these things that are great little moments, a lot of ambient music as well. And,
Mhm.
it's kind of this ever-present tone, sometimes a little more obvious as you're hearing it sort of echoing from across, of a house or a parking lot or passing by. But it is a really true experience of Florida. It's like always somebody has the radio on as you're walking
Yes,
by. Often they're
absolutely.
biking by you with their radio on. It is this, universal. And I'm curious about how you chose that music,
Mhm.
what it was meant to evoke.
Yeah, well, I love that you say that, because it truly was meant to evoke what you actually do here in the streets. And I'd started editing with a lot of like Bruce Springsteen songs and sort of like modern country as well. And when it comes to licensing the rights, you have to change these big like musicians. You can't keep them. So we worked with my music supervisor Taylor Rowley into recreating what you actually could be hearing in those parts of Florida. And as well, we do take the liberty at times to sort of leave the present moment and sort of lean into the dreaminess with music that's less, diegetic and but it always starts. I feel like when you enter a scene and there's music, it always starts from within, as if these people were actually passing time by listening to music, and you can hear the presence of a neighbor somewhere, whether it's in the motel scene or whatnot. You can hear the people through the music. That's why I love using this echoey effect. It's really to suggest a sort of proximity that you don't experience by actually connecting with someone, but they are there. So it's but definitely inspired by, especially in the summers, just so many people biking by with music and radios, definitely inspired by these sounds.
Yeah. I wanna ask you a little bit about shooting in Atlantic Beach, kind of how that went, and also your decision to incorporate basically a local cast, most of them, if not all of them, sort of non-actors or at least, not professional actors at this point. Can you talk a little bit about how you cast this and how quickly you had to shoot it?
Yeah, it was I was in pre-production for about 2-3 months before we started shooting, and that meant scouting, auditioning, and I was working with my family, my one of the producers, Jason Simpson, my father, Bob Simpson. They were insanely supportive, and then I met Grace Altmeyer, who ultimately went through all the auditions with me, and it went from street casting to posting a note on Facebook and being like, come to this open call, or just casting someone off of, for example, the young girl, Bryn. I met her at the diner at the Grumpy's, and I felt so charmed by her immediately, and I didn't even audition her. We just had coffee, and it was exciting, and I think a lot of meeting these people inspired me for scenes like the BMX professional that you see in the background of one of the night scenes was someone who reached out saying like, oh, if you ever need a BMX professional, here's my demo, and it sparked this idea for this sort of odd creature that comes out in the night. So it was a lot of writing while we were auditioning, and I think, yeah, 3 months after arriving for the pre-production, it was set, the crew was arriving. I mean, half of the crew was arriving from Europe, and we were shooting.
And you mentioned, Bryn Hoffbauer. Was she working at the diner when you met her?
Yeah, she was working at the diner, but she's such a curious and open-minded person, and when we simply had coffee, and that was enough for me to see that she could be that person, this sort of vehicle for someone who witnesses their place disappear. And she had this sort of, I don't know, nostalgia in her look that really got to me, and I guess I somehow saw a bit of myself in her. So it was, for most of these people that we casted, it was a very natural process.
That's so interesting, and, I mean, for people who watch this film, there's so many familiar locations, and you really kind of work in the visual vernacular of Northeast Florida. People will recognize the Voussoir Bar, the Magic Beach Motel, which is this, neon, um, uh well, it's just kind of an interesting neon, like, visual scape down in Volano Beach, but also the former Gate gas station that's in South Ponte Vedra, which is sort of this isolated, interesting visual space, and then the skate park, the Oceanside Skate Park, the souvenir shop, which I guess you had a personal connection with too, that's right by Pete's Bar.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was really a mix of places of my childhood, like the public swimming pool. That's where I learned how to swim. That skate park, like I would be this person just sort of longing to understand this youth in Florida. And then working with locals, they really brought so much to me. Like the Voussoir was an idea from Kevin Hogenkamp, city deputy manager at Atlantic Beach. He was like, you should absolutely check out this bar, and it worked out so well. And the gas station was Grace Altmeyer, who I mentioned earlier. She was like, "This is my gas station of my childhood. Like, would you be interested?" And we scouted it, and it was very striking aesthetically, and it was a lot of richness that was brought to me by working with local people, which makes sense.
One of the things that you bring, as you said, is kind of outsider eyes, but also this great insider knowledge, and you capture these um, visual references that people who are from here will completely get. There's the kid at the skate park, and even though it's like the middle of the summer and 90 something degrees is wearing his like stocking cap, his black stocking cap, his beanie, or the
Yeah, yeah.
people who are throwing the pool furniture into the pool because the storm's coming. One thing I loved was the kind of there's always somebody lighting off fireworks, no matter what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so I think it must have been kind of, I guess, fun to work those in because this place, um, and also kind of present it in a way that pointed out to people that are from here.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah. No, it's so fun and so really small memories of my experience in being there. I mean, the fireworks to me, it's such a striking memory, like the 4th of July along this strip of beaches from Jack's Beach to Atlantic Beach to it's it's such an exciting sight for me. And I don't know, there were so many yeah, so many ideas that just came from, oh, I don't know what this does narratively, but it speaks of a place and it speaks of my experience of a place that is very much local, you know. So that yeah, I'm glad that it comes across, and I'm very excited for locals to see it and perhaps feel this proximity with that yeah, with my experience.
What about the involvement of locals? I know that there's some local names that people will recognize when they're reading the credits. But I think that
Mhm.
even for your crew, you kind of displaced your dad from his house for a place to stay. Can you talk a little bit about the role that the community played, either in participating in or supporting the production?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, it started by Facebook posts, and there was I made it into the Atlantic Beach magazine. I think it's monthly or weekly, I forget. But people from Atlantic Beach and even beyond started reaching out, like if you need a room, if you need a home, if you need this bike, if you need this car. And so there was such an excitement I don't think that it's very common to see a film set in maybe more in Jacksonville, but not in Atlantic Beach or any of these beaches. So there was really an excitement to get involved, and we really seized that. Like my father was living at our neighbor's place, while my production team from Europe, we were all camping in his house basically. And it yeah, we for a film that's super shoestring budget, if you don't have that support of the community, it's just impossible. They really made it with this support, and that's how it came to life.
We are talking to Alexandra Simpson. She is the writer, director, also the editor and the sound designer of No Sleep Till. It is a film that is set and shot in Atlantic Beach. It is currently playing at film festivals, but is coming to have its premiere here in Jacksonville at WJCT Studios at the end of September. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. You can call us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can email questions or comments to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We do have a question from Jane on Facebook, Alexandra. She says, what type of questions about the USA is the film prompting from international viewers? And she adds that she can't wait to see the film in September at WJCT.
Mhm. I've only had I've had mostly questions about what is it like to wait for a hurricane in Florida, because it is so. I mean, people know about this phenomenon. Even to Europe, all the way to Europe, they know about it. And then on more detailed stuff, like for example, I've been asked, why are there so many screens in your film? Like what is that? And that's something that's not true of France, of most of Europe, is that you don't have as many like TV screens and bars in people's homes. So like it goes from the most detailed to more, I guess, more existential questions.
Yeah, the television screen is also kind of one of these themes throughout the film. A lot of people are watching, weather, but a lot of people
Yeah,
are just watching, Jaguars games, and they're watching, regular television, and it is kind of in all of these scenes. It's a theme where people are kind of tuned in to
yeah.
something.
Yeah, and when you anticipate a storm, the only reality, the only thing that makes it concrete is the news. So
Mm.
it's going to be turned on in every bar, on every radio, and that sort of links everyone in this moment of anticipation.
So we talked about the fact that this is not a super linear film, but the stories are all kind of if not interdependent, they all kind of help flesh out the experience of this place and these people. And, two of the characters are these friends, longtime friends who decide to use this storm as an excuse head out of town and to go try their luck in Philly. They're stand-up comics or kind of amateur comics. Um, and I want to, if we can, just play an exchange here. This is a soundbite from one of the characters named Mike in the film. He's played by Xavier Brown Sanders, who's a local. Let's just take a listen.
You know what's weird? I knew this was gonna happen. Like, I hope for it. For something. Like an excuse to do something. And I'm excited we're doing something.
So in that scene, they're camping out in his friend's car. The storm is moving in, but it's almost like in the narrative of these two that it takes this like potential catastrophe to almost break through the malaise of their life.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the friendship that these two share and how this storm kind of changes that relationship in some ways?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've from before, so it was 2 things. It was I wanna make a film in this place, and I've been so touched by a sense of doom, especially when it comes to youth. I mean, anything like, when I watch Gus Van Sant's films, or there was on This American Life, there was this episode of teens going to prom, and while they were in prom, their whole town got, like, completely wrecked, and they came out to just a changed world. Just that loss of innocence is something that I knew I wanted to work with. And for these two friends, you really feel like they're lifetime friends, that they know how to talk to each other, they know what gets them. But you also feel it's like that point of age where you're starting to choose your friends, and sometimes what really keeps you together are just memories, or memories of the past. And very subtly, I think we tried to show that they're coming to this moment where they're realizing that their friendship is sort of coming to an end. And I was extremely inspired by a film called Old Joy, directed by Kelly Reichardt, because it's so subtly approached. You don't need to know their past or their future. It's just very present in the delicate, like the how fragile they say the things that they say when it's serious, including this sort of monologue. It's such awkwardly delivered monologue, because it is hard to be honest in these moments. And I think that they're both understanding that they're falling apart.
That's interesting because I mean, the film's ending is sort of ambiguous, and I was curious whether you felt that their relationship was growing stronger or less so by the film's end, and it sounds like you think it really is heading towards an ending of kinds.
I think it's a realization of we we're turning into two different people. Our experiences are different. There is a sort of codependency, but at the same time, I think that they're realizing that, or at least for Jordan's character who plays Will, I think that he's realizing that there's a sort of how do you say it? He's a little out of place in this relationship. And I think that these moment of honesty is a sign of strength. But ultimately, yes, I feel like I was talking about precarity earlier. I think I was exploring the precarity in this friendship.
I do wanna ask you because I'm sure you get questions about it, and you and I spoke about it previously, which is just the title of this film. It is not inspired by the Beastie Boys song, "No Sleep Till Brooklyn." Can you tell us a little bit about what this title means?
Yeah, I didn't know this song until people were like, "Oh yeah, No Sleep Till Brooklyn." I was like, "What is that?" It's I made a short film when I was in film school, much more experimental. It was all with archival footage, and it was people waiting, very similarly to this feature film, people waiting. You understand there's a storm outside, and you don't really know what they're waiting for, but you know that they're all waiting for the same thing. And there's a sort of burst at the end, and they all go dancing. And the radio that plays at the beginning of this film is a radio that's called No Sleep Till. So I'd call the short No Sleep Till. When it came to finding a title for this film, my producer Tyler Taramina was like, "This is perfectly accurate. Just use that title." And I think he's right. I think it is accurate because there really is a relationship to sleep and the lack of sleep and what happens in the lack of sleep. And then eventually you do perhaps see someone fall asleep in this car in the just after this scene that you played. I think it's a great title. And I like that it's this sort of suspenseful title when the film is actually not really leaning into suspense.
It is, we should say most of this happens overnight. Most of the film, it must have been quite a challenge to just be shooting in the darkness throughout
Yeah.
so much of the film. But I was talking to my executive producer who watched a screener of this as well. We were talking about how I got every shot looks almost like a photograph. Like it's set up in such a kind of beautifully balanced way, but also it kind of reminded of photos by the artist William Eggleston, who kind of has these
Mhm.
really old-timey in a way. They kind of capture that same look that your film does in some ways, at this sort of bygone era, I guess.
Mhm, mhm.
How did you, like, think about the shots that and I guess a shout out too to your cinematographer, for
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. He was very mad at me for most of the time because he was like, "Well, how do you expect to get, like, image when there's no lights?" But we really did rely a lot on natural light from locations, including, for example, for the motel scene. And I think that when you don't have a lot of means, at least for me, it was extremely important to have a very thought through composition because it's easy for film to feel and look cheap if you have zero means behind. So I think we were very attentive to putting all of our efforts in showing up, and we my references, I mean, I've been yeah, a lot of people has talked about William Eggleston, but our references were really cinematographic. I mean, we were watching films together. We were going back to certain scenes, and I would be like, for example, there's a scene in a film called Nénette et Bonnie by Claire Denis, French film, and there's a scene where this guy is just sort of lost in the mall, and you feel he's very close, though he's actually super far away in distance because everything around him is sort of blurred. And I showed this to my DP. I was like, okay, how do we get this? He was like, oh, easy, use this lens. So it was really, we talked, we came up with these shots by watching films and by referencing films.
So this film, as we said, is it's gonna have its, like, local premiere here, on September 30th, and it's my understanding that you're gonna do a short, Q&A with the audience after it screens, but I know that you said you're excited to have it kind of finally play in the place that it was made.
Yeah, I mean, I want the people who are the most concerned to see it. It's been 2 years of showing it around, and I've had actually Floridian people come up to me and tell me, "Wow, this really hits home." But I'm the most excited to show it to to who it's the most relevant to, I'm also a little scared, but I it's gonna be full circle, and it's gonna be exactly 2 years after we started the shoot.
Well, Alexandra Simpson, thank you so much for doing this morning. We appreciate it. Congratulations on the film. As we mentioned, it screens at WJCT Studios on September 30th at 7 p.m. And you can find more info at wjct.org/film. Alexandra, thank you again so much.
Thanks so much, Anne.